Hello, Thomas.
Hello, Micah. How are you?
I'm actually pretty great today.
Wonderful.
It's a little cold, but
Yeah.
it's a great day today.
Yeah, it is beautiful outside.
Okay, so the last biblical discipline that we have, we were going to go over and talk about.
We have one more. I added one. Sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Surprise. Right
so
now.
now I'm waiting in like eager anticipation as everybody else is right
Yeah,
now.
that's right. Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about tithing.
Yeah.
So I think tithing is an interesting one because it's not something that people I think probably think about as far as a spiritual discipline.
Sure. Yeah.
It's definitely like if you've been a Christian for a period of time, you probably should be aware that there is an expectation for Christians to tithe
Absolutely.
to their church, but I do think that most Christians have a incomplete
Sure.
definition and perspective
Yep.
of tithing. And so I'd like to sort of flesh out the different aspects that we should be considering and taking into consideration for that spiritual discipline.
Yeah. That's good.
So I guess I have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
We'll see how far we go down rabbit trails for this.
And there's some rabbit trails.
There always is, and
Yeah.
that's great. I think that it provokes further thought and discussion as well. But the first question I have is, what is the biblical definition of tithing? Just to start off as a baseline.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, just if we are gonna take the primary, what is the word tithe, right? Tithe means 10%, right? So that's the meaning of the word tithe. When we talk about tithing, we talk about giving 10% of our income to God for the work of God. We see this all throughout the Old Testament. There's tithes on several things that were specifically mentioned in the Old Testament, and so we see all throughout the Old Testament a command that God's people would give 10% of what their increase would be in order to care for to take care of the work of God. It didn't start with Old Testament law. But it did. But that's where we see the consistent week in, week out, year in, year out giving there. Preachers will rightly point to the fact that the first time a tithe is mentioned is actually Abraham giving to Mephibosheth. Not Mephibosheth, Melchizedek. There we go. My goodness, that's embarrassing. Melchizedek, that king and priest, there in the book of Genesis, and that was, of course, before the law, before Moses received the law, and so we see that happening there. There's probably some nuance that needs to be talked about there. That Abraham gave a tenth of what he gathered in a battle. He wasn't giving a tenth of all of his increase year by year by year, right? Like that's not it. So when we say tithing happened before, it did one time for this one specific incident. And so I want to be careful that we're thinking about this in context and correctly as a whole. So when we say tithing, when we think about Old Testament tithing, we're thinking about the fact that 10% is being given to the work of God. When we talk about the New Testament, is where it starts to get a little bit, different people have different ideas, and we want to be generous and gracious to different thought processes here. Most people are coming from good places when they have disagreements in this situation, okay? But the New Testament actually only mentions tithing 3 times.
Oh, interesting.
All 3 times is actually negative. It is not Jesus condemning tithing specifically. Rather, it is Jesus condemning tithing of the way that tithes were given,
the
right?
spirit of the tithing.
Yep. So you get tithes of mint and you're giving tithes of mint and your herbs, right? But you neglect the weightier matters of the law, right? Jesus says to the Pharisees. And so the practice of tithing, I want to be clear, the practice of tithing, Jesus, Paul, none of the New Testament authors ever criticize it. They don't ever say, that's stupid, don't do that anymore. But nor do they reinforce it and say, this is how giving should happen. So there's that. But Jesus absolutely, the 3 times it's specifically mentioned that this is a tithe, the 3 times it's specifically mentioned, Jesus actually is correcting wrong attitudes and wrong motives. involved with that. Instead, when the New Testament talks about giving, it doesn't specifically talk about a tithe most of the time, right? So here's how the arguments typically go, right? So a church like ours would say something like this. Well, there's New Testament giving is certainly, it's not just a tithe, that's fine, but tithing happened before the Old Testament law, right? Okay. That Abraham and Melchizedek conversation, which we already talked about. It's not the same. It's not one to one. We need to acknowledge that and be honest about that in the text. So instead, the New Testament talks about giving generously, talks about giving cheerfully. The New Testament talks about, Paul, of course, has much to say about giving, and again, in reference to a specific offering that he is gathering up for the saints at Jerusalem who are going through a difficult time. So there's a lot that is going on in that tithing piece, or in that giving realm, that Paul is saying, hey, you need to be, specifically the Church of Corinth. He has two letters, of course, to the Church of Corinth. Both of them talk about this, right? So, hey, you have the church, you promised you were going to give to these saints. You need to be giving it every week. Bring it on Sunday when you go to the church, so we don't have to go gather it when I get there. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of conversations are happening. But beyond those one-off offerings, and I don't know, one-off is probably not quite the right word, but those special offerings, beyond that, the New Testament talks a lot about the fact that giving is supposed to be a part. We're calling this spiritual disciplines. Mm-hmm. Jesus talks not so much about tithing, but absolutely about giving in that Sermon on the Mount. Mm-hmm. In the same conversation, he's talking about praying, and in the same conversation, he's talking about fasting. He's talking about giving. And so there is no question, right? So here's what happens, right? The preachers like me and you and us and churches like ours, wait. We don't want to say that tithing isn't what's required, because then people won't give. Sure. And the truth is that Jesus expects that we're giving. Right. Like that's a common theme all throughout the New Testament, like, and the Old Testament, like. From Genesis chapter 3, there's this idea that God gives, and so we would too, right? Like there's this, all throughout. And so that's something that is important. Also, the practice of that church in Acts, the early church in the book of Acts, it was way more than tithing. And so we do need to just acknowledge that too. It's like the practice of the early church was not, here's my 10% and I'm done. The practice of the early church was, let me sell my house, I'll give you the profits of that, and we'll figure out what I'm doing later, right? Like that
would be quite contradictory to every church in America,
right? A little bit different, a little bit different. And so we just need to acknowledge that, like, I don't know. How about this? I think we're doing a misservice if we say that Jesus expects 10% and we can write your check for 10% and you're done. I think that we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to our church family if we only leave it there. I don't think that 10% is a problem. I think it's a good place to begin. I think it's a good place to aim. I think it's a good place to start. I think that there is much that we could say about if this is what was the expectation for the Old Testament saints under the law. How much more should we be generous under grace and with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit within us? And so maybe so I just think we might be doing ourselves a disservice, and not the church. I think we're doing saints, like Christians, a disservice to say you've done your due if you pay your 10%. I think that we have maybe missed that a little bit. I think the purpose of giving is not to have another checkbox that we can mark and say, yep, did it. It's exactly what the Pharisees were doing. That is literally exactly what they were doing. Yeah. You tithe of your mint and row, but you neglect everything else. That's a problem, right? And so much of the teaching of the New Testament talks about, there's a lot. We don't even have time in a podcast like this to even read all of the verses that deal with giving. There's a lot of them. So we need to put away the mindset or idea that, like, if we don't demand a tithe, that giving isn't expected. It of course is expected, but also maybe we need to examine a little bit more about why this is so important.
It does seem like the conversation should be more in line like when Jesus was talking about when you're fasting.
Yeah.
Or like it wasn't ever the conversation of like if you're going to fast. He's like he literally said, well, like when you fast,
when you do it,
right?
Yep.
And so it should be the conversation for tithing should be like when you give, not if you give or how much. It's like no, it's like
that's exactly what he says, right?
And that mentality of what Paul was talking about within you were giving everything within that early church. Yeah. That does seem more to line up with Jesus's perspective on wealth, on following him, and sell all your belongings, and then you can follow me.
Yeah.
It's very contradictory to a lot of American culture and about even the American church. And I don't even know if it's wrong necessarily, but it is different.
Yeah, I think it's really. You said this, and I think you tapped into the heart behind what is going on here. Following Jesus is everything.
Yeah,
and we wouldn't say I've given Jesus 10% of my week, so I get to do whatever else I want. I mean, we do say that, but we don't say it out loud. Yeah. Right? We don't say it out loud.
Our actions say that.
Right, our actions say that a lot of times.
Yeah.
No accusations. Just say that this is how it works for us. Right. I gave Jesus the first the first part of my day so that I can do whatever else I want with my day. I gave Jesus Sunday so I can do whatever I want Monday. That's not how we think about that. We think, if we're thinking right, especially, that Jesus gets it all. So isn't it strange that then with our money, we say, oh, the mark of following Jesus is giving him 10%, and then I get to do whatever else I want with the rest of it. And I would just challenge that actually Jesus is supposed to have your whole life, not 10% of it. Yeah. Right. And I think that there are times where there's such a pushback about having a number attached. Like, so I could never give 10% of my income to Jesus. And my question then would be, you would never give 10% of your income to Jesus. That's interesting. That's interesting because God believers of God's people have been doing that for millennia, right? I mean, that God's people have been doing that and more for millennia. So it's strange then that we would hold that back and say, no, this is mine. I think instead it's all supposed to be there for him. Yeah. He can have any of it and all of it. Of course, then the problem comes when we say, he can have any of it, but we never give any of it. Then he doesn't really have any of it, right?
If you were to turn that conversation point around of like, I can't ever give 10%, or I'm giving. Well, let's say somebody is super generous and they're saying they're giving 30%,
sure,
right, of their income or their time or whatever giving. Yeah. That's great, but like, would we ever say or think, well, Jesus is only going to give us 20% of his of relationship with him,
of course,
or 20% of his blessings, or 20% of his love? Like, no, of course not. Yep. Like he gives us everything, and we have full access to him, and we never would say that we have 20% of his time when we're praying about things. Like, no, of course not. And so like. It does seem strange, and I agree that the conversation point within this 10% and only 10%, or not even sometimes for people, is like it's very one-sided.
Yeah, I agree
on our part.
Yep,
that's crazy to think about, and within that idea.
Yep.
So then the second question I have for you is, God doesn't need our money. Let's be clear about that. Like, he's God. He works outside of the fiat system.
Yes.
Thankfully,
the God that created all things with his voice certainly does not need your $7.
He works outside the Fed.
Right. Yeah.
So acknowledging that, like, why is tithing so important?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, that we hold on to things. Like, so this is important in the same way that bowing to worship is important. And I know we keep coming back to this, but we spent weeks on this, like why this, like why worship and why we bow for worship. We spent weeks on that. And it would be weird to say, Jesus, you own it all, but then never give any of it, right? Like, it's all yours, but never do anything about that.
Yeah.
That's weird. But besides that, really practically, Jesus designed his church, his work, to be funded primarily by his people. That's the way he designed. Now, I recognize we could go throughout the Bible and see, oh, look at this time. In fact, you're preaching through the book of Nehemiah, right? And Nehemiah, the walls are built, and Nehemiah is funded not by the saints in Jerusalem, but actually by the king back in Persia. I reckon that happens, right? That happens. It is supposed to be the exception, not the rule. And so for a church family, for us and where we are in his kingdom is Harvest Baptist Church. Harvest Baptist Church is supposed to be funded by the members of Harvest Baptist Church. And so that includes all the things that have to be done with a building, with salaries, with gas for the bus or for the van, right? All of the things that need to be done. The primary way that that's supposed to happen is through the funding of people who are connected to this church. So we will take advantage of the light grant that our state gave us that replaced lights out that need to be replaced. We'll take advantage of that. But if we're over here expecting that everything that we do is going to be funded by our government, that's a problem. Yeah. If we're over here having to, and again, I think there's exceptions to rules. I think there's times when things happen, whatever. But if we are out here like expecting our community to take on the bill for us, I think we have misunderstood our responsibility and our role to handle the ministry that God gave to this church. Yeah. And so could God take care of it other ways? Sure. Could he provide a very wealthy king to drop, the funds in our lap? Sure. I suppose he could. He did with Nehemiah, right? Sure. So great. That's not the typical way he works. And the day by day, in and out way that God works to provide for the needs of his kingdom is through his people. And so why is tithing important? Why is giving important? Maybe a better way to say that. Why is giving important? Well, because there's a work of Jesus that has to go on. Yeah. And it doesn't happen without money in the realm that we live in. Yeah. And so that has to go. Like we have to, there has to be work done. Now we can say, hey, I don't want to give that much, so we're going to change how we do things. I mean, we can look into those things. Yeah. Right. But that's not like, no matter what we do, there's going to be costs involved. Right. And it has to come from somewhere. And the ones that are responsible for it are the ones that God has commissioned to go and to send and to do, and that's us. Yeah.
That's good. Maybe that's why God didn't create money to grow on trees.
Maybe.
So then, can other things be considered tithing? Because I have heard of it time, like giftings or things that you're naturally inclined to do or experience sometimes possibly. Like can other things be considered tithing or are we really just talking about money? Because you could say giving of your time or giving of your other things as well. Is
Jesus
it just
gave
money?
himself. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. When we say God gave, he gave his only begotten son.
So maybe it's different. We should be splitting that out, giving versus tithing.
Maybe
Jesus definitely gave himself, but did he tithe of himself? No, probably
clearly
not.
Yeah, clearly not.
But is it just money or is it other things as well?
Yeah. So I think that we're gonna have a hard time separating money from this conversation, right? So it also bothers me a little bit if we're having this conversation and our immediate jump is, well, I do this, so then I don't have to. I think we're again we've begun to miss the point again that this is about our whole life, not just about a portion of it, right? So I gave enough of my time to counteract the 10% that I owed. And I think we're missing the whole, our world view about this is so out of whack
It is interesting that you use the word owed.
Yeah.
Because we don't owe God 10%. We owe him 100% because he chose to pay for all of our sin.
Right. Yes.
So we don't die when we go to hell.
Yeah, right?
And go to
Exactly.
hell. Like, it's like that that perspective of what we owe versus what we give is an interesting idea.
Yep. I do want to recognize that there are so I want to acknowledge like Jesus's acknowledgement of like the widow who gave in her 2 mites, right? And again, we're talking about money, right? In that case, but Jesus is looked at that situation and said, look at her giving all that she had left, everything that she had, and threw it all in, and that's what he praised, as opposed to these who threw in giant bags of money. And he, in his estimation, right, and this is what he said, she gave more than all of them. And so I think that it's worth just, I think that can we give more than just money? Of course we can.
Sure.
And in fact, we probably should, right? This is about our whole life, not just about not just about the money that we give, not just a check that we write. But if we're going to, if our default or if our tendency is, oh, I'm keeping track of how many hours I spent at the church pulling weeds this week, and I'm deducting that from my, I think we've missed the point, right? If we're saying, well, I bought 3 bags of candy, and so I'm going to take that out of, again, I think that we've missed the point. And I'm not saying you can't do either or both or whatever. Yeah. But I think that if the mindset is, well, I want my money for me. So I guess in order to fulfill my obligations to the church or in order to fulfill my obligations to Jesus, I'll show up and do some service there. Then it would be the same way as if somebody said, well, I value my time more than I value the money that I have. So I'll write a check so that I don't have to go serve there. And we would condemn that pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think in the same way, like we have to be fair that this is, it's a both and. Like, yes, giving is about, it's about all of us. It's about our whole being. And so that includes our pocketbook, and that includes our time, and that includes our talents, and that includes the mental space that we have. And like Jesus ought to have some of that. And so I think it's all of it. And I think that's, I want to be careful. Like I keep hesitating a little bit because I don't want to, because there are people that I know and love who struggle. They're fixed income and struggle to make ends meet. And I recognize the difficulty that this brings. A conversation like this is uncomfortable because it brings difficulty. And the way that they give to Jesus is maybe more on a service-based side than it is on a numerical dollar amount side. And I don't want to diminish that, right? Because again, this is about giving Jesus everything, not that we have the scales perfectly balanced or some other thing like that. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm clearly communicating this well.
I think like it. To say it's only about money would obviously be inaccurate. I think you could probably say that money, that tithing is a reflection of where your heart is, and so where your heart is will determine how willing you are to give.
Yeah. How about this? Money is to giving what bowing is to worship.
That's good.
Right.
I like that.
So can you worship without bowing? No, right. We talked about that. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's the most normal way.
Yeah.
Right. Like it'd be weird to never do that. Right. Like, I mean, how many times have we said that? A lot.
You, as you brought up at the very beginning, tithing is 10% as well. So it's part of it. Right. 100%.
Right. Yeah. It has to be. Right. I mean,
it's in the name.
It's built in. Right.
Similar
it's right
to
there.
Bow is to worship.
Right. It's right there. So yeah. But can we give apart from our money? Of course we can. And in fact, it is interesting that when Paul is talking to the Corinthians about giving, right? When Paul's talking to the Corinthians about giving, he talks about the poor saints oh boy, I should have read this again before we sat down. He talks about the saints. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, I believe. Talks about the saints in another place, and he says they gave not like we intended, right? They gave of the first themselves and then to this offering, right? They first gave themselves and then they gave the money. And I think that's like, I think Paul's calling that out on purpose to remind us that like it's easy sometimes for some people to write a check and to be done.
Yeah.
But that's not giving yourself. And sometimes it's easy to give some, a free Saturday and say that excuses me from any financial obligation and any financial recognition that Jesus gave to me.
Yeah.
And so I think both are messed up. And I think we need to find a little bit more middle ground, and giving money has to be a part of this conversation. Yeah. We don't have this conversation without talking about money. So
fair enough.
Yep.
Okay. So then I guess the last question, and this could be probably a conversation in itself.
All by itself.
But, so I've heard it said in church and taught, not in this church specifically, but like I've heard it said that the more a Christian gives to God, generally speaking, the more God is inclined to bless them financially. Like, is that a sound principle biblically? Because like I've found it to be true in my own life, where like, not to say that the more I give, the more He gives me. But it sort of sometimes works out that way, where like I get a better job, or I get a raise, or like I'm faithful, and so it's like I've shown myself over time to be a good money manager, or and God says, okay, well, I'll give you a little bit more. Like He can trust us more with be a good
Yeah.
So okay, so then is that idea or thought process sound biblically?
Yeah, I have several things I want to acknowledge. I don't know what order to put them in, so we're just going to go. I don't know that any of these are the more important than the other. Okay,
well, let's just go for it.
So the principle of sowing and reaping is sound.
Okay,
right? Principle of sowing and reaping is sound. And in fact, 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about in reference to giving, money specifically, because you give to this offering generously, and Jesus is going to bless you generously. He's talking, like, he specifically gives that. We recognize that principle. In fact, that the sow sparingly shall also reap sparingly. And it's in reference to giving money. It is the conversation. You get to Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24, 25, and there's, the principle is that generosity is generous people receive abundantly. That's the principle. Okay. Here's the problem I have, though, is that most of the time, preachers who say things like that, right, give more to God and He will give more to you, are using this as a weapon and a tool of manipulation
to try to get people to give more,
to get more,
to increase salaries, or to increase whatever budgets.
Yeah. And so we have to be careful, because obviously giving's in the Bible. It's gonna come up. Okay. Yeah. So not every time do we have a conversation about giving in behind a pulpit is this a money grab or a greed issue. Faithful preachers have to preach about giving. It's in the Bible. Yeah. So if your pastor's going to preach biblically, it's gonna come up, and it's gonna come up fairly often because it's in the Bible fairly often. Sure. So what are we going to do, right? But a statement that ignores the situations of life like that, it sounds catchy. And so I get like I struggle with a blanket statement that says, give more. If you're in financial trouble, just start giving more and Jesus will handle it. Generosity matters, but so does stewardship, right? And generosity matters, but so does wisdom, right? Like, and these things are like, it can't be one thing. We can't ignore generosity and only talk about like, make sure your bills are paid, right? We can't only talk about stewardship in that way, but nor can we ignore only talk about generosity and ignore wisdom. It says, hey, you might want to put a couple of dollars in a bank account somewhere. Like you have to, you need all of that. It can't be one thing or the other. But the overwhelming biblical understanding is that somebody who is generous, Jesus is going to care for them. Jesus is going to take care of it. And so that's really important, right? So yes, that's true. And yet also, I dislike how it can be used. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I think the problem, blah, 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 blah. I think the thing that makes me most concerned is that it reverses the order, right? You want more, give more. Okay. That can be a catchy end to a sermon, like that's fine, right? After faithful biblical teaching, right? That we could use that as a moment.
That context has been given. That perspective has been understood.
Sure, all of that.
Yeah.
But I think that a conversation that says, "Give more to God, and you get more from Him," I think that actually is backwards. I think it's backwards because we already have received from Him. We've already been given. And yeah, He's going to take care of us financially. He will. Like He promises that for sure, no problem. But we don't give because we want to be blessed. We give because He gave. He gave to us, so we give to Him. Like it started with Him already. We're always in the we could never give enough to be on the like owed side of this. Like, oh, now I'm owed something because we're always on the debtor side of this conversation because of what Jesus paid for, gave us.
I was talking to the youth group, it was last Sunday, I think. Like Jesus literally specifically said He will, like, and in reference to lilies, right?
Yeah,
and like, how much more will I provide? Does the God Father provide for you? Like, and so like, but interestingly though, like, Jesus never guaranteed that we would have a house,
right,
or a nice car,
right.
Like these are all things that we decide that we want and need, and
sure.
and then have to take on debt or to pay for, and
totally.
And so yes, He's going to provide for us, but it may not necessarily be at the level that we want.
Yeah. Yep.
You know.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think giving out of a cheerful and generous heart has no transactional motivation. If I do this, then that wouldn't be generous. That would be scheming, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not cheerful. That's, I don't know, grubby. I don't know.
Sure.
Something different than cheerful, right? But there's no transactional like, this is how you want to get the most out of Jesus. Give 10%. And he'll, like, that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
It can't be. We never end up on the I've paid more side of this equation. We're always only doing what a master wants us to do. Right? It's all His anyway. It's not even like we're really like it's all His.
That was one thing that I thought before we started this conversation was I think most people have a wrong perspective of money and what's theirs versus what's God's.
Right.
You know, it's like we have a perception that, and rightfully so or not,
sure.
I don't know.
Whatever.
Like, but people, sacrifice time in exchange for money.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's what job is.
Job, and we are expected to work, but like it's also like we have like an ownership over that because of that exchange.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's like, what's ours versus what's actually God's.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point to make that like, we do things for it. And which is right. We should.
Of course it is.
But it's also not necessarily complete in that, like, just because we earn it doesn't mean it's actually ours.
Yes.
Like it would be the same way as like a servant were to do a job for a master,
100%.
where that reward isn't the servant's, it's still the master's.
100%.
And so, like how we choose to use that blessing is kind of everything within this that conversation.
I think so.
So
it's all His. It has to be if we're thinking right.
That's crazy. That is really interesting to think about.
Yep.
This conversation has been really good, Thomas.
Okay, well, I'm glad.
I was kind of curious.
Yeah.
I remember after the business meeting this last year, like we were talking about, last year was the first time I had sat through a business meeting and saw all the money and where it goes and even the dollars of how it's accounted for. And so, like I had made a comment to you afterwards. It was like, well, we just need to increase our members so that they can give more, or there's more to give,
Right.
And he goes, yeah, you're just like, yeah, that would be great. And I without even thinking, I think I had said something to the effect, well, have you considered preaching on tithing? and you had said, well, yeah, it's sort of the statistical thing that sort of happens in a lot of churches is that when you preach on tithing, people tend to tithe less.
Yeah.
And so I was curious to see how this conversation would go and sort of what would come of it.
Yeah.
And this has been really good.
Yeah. I'm not worried about preaching about money.
Yeah.
Because it's in the Bible. I don't want to preach the Bible.
Yeah.
But I do want to be careful that we're not making a bigger thing of something that, if Jesus is talking about it this much, we're going to talk about this much too. Though it comes up, it is interesting too. We got to wrap up somewhere, but it is interesting how Jesus talks over and over and over again like when people come to him and say, "Hey, I want to follow you," and he says, "Sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me." And it's interesting how often that happens in the Gospels, and I think that some of that is because people of Jesus' day struggle in the same way that we struggle.
Yeah.
That my money is my money.
Yeah.
And what I choose to share with you is whatever. But so I think we, as followers of Jesus, we have to go past this is mine, this is his, this is the church's, whatever. I think we have to come to a position and a place where we say all of it is Jesus's.
Yeah.
And if for everything that I have, everything that he gave to me, everything that I worked for, it's all his. And so if that means that he wants more, and then I'm willing to do that, which is why things like Faith Promise are so important in my mind. That we're praying specifically about how much do you want me to commit to give for this next year for this project, right? And I think of this why it's so important, because it's another opportunity to practice generosity. And the vast majority of that money doesn't even stay here. It doesn't benefit Harvest almost at all. We hire a summer intern out of that. And that is the benefit to Harvest. The rest of that money gets given away.
Yeah.
And but it's like the work of the kingdom, right? And so I think that's really cool. And watching people say, wait, no, it's not just what I decided to give, what is the right amount, 10% or whatever the dollar amount is that I am giving to my church. I'm going to give this too. And when I give this, what I'm seeing is that Jesus does give. He takes care of us, and actually I'm able to make it just like I was before.
Yeah.
And or I'm willingly giving up the thing that I was giving up in order to do this, and that's a worthy sacrifice. That's good for us to. Hey, I'm not going to go to Starbucks, and instead I'm going to give that to missions. Great. Then then most people aren't over here pining over Starbucks, right? You know what I mean? You make that sacrifice, and you go, wait a second, that was worth it, because because souls are way better than Starbucks. So this is a worthy endeavor. I think that that's really important, is that our mindset and our focus isn't about what's the bare minimum. Our mindset and focus probably needs to be, it's all yours anyway. You can take whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can have it all. And you'll take care of me like you said you would.
I think if people were to really truly come to that realization and accept it as truth within their life, that's a really scary thing.
Yeah. Of course.
And so, I mean, truthfully, I have no idea how many percentage of Christians would be even ready to take that jump. Sure. But that's literally what Jesus said.
Yeah. It ought to be more of us ought to be ready for that today than we were yesterday. We ought to be growing to that, right? Yeah. And honestly, this is This is the message of Luke, right? We're going through Luke in Sunday morning. This is that Jesus demands it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't new or strange. Like, oh my goodness, I've never heard like this is just regular gospel stuff.
Yeah.
Like this isn't actually that crazy. We're the crazy ones by holding back.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the way that people who have fully devoted themselves to following Jesus have lived forever.
Yeah.
Like, and so, yeah, it also would be interesting. You want a thought experiment. Think about if everyone followed Jesus, like all of their money, all of their life, their whole thing was, if every member of Harvest had that kind of a mindset about their finances, Harvest would never need for any, like the church would never need for anything that Jesus wanted it done, right? Like we would never ever be coming up going, hey, we need to have an offering about this, or hey guys, what do you think about? Like we would never come to those positions.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, like Harvest is like we're doing fine. Like we're thankful and grateful, and like we try to be open and honest about budgets and finances and all that kind of stuff. Like we're doing great.
Yeah.
But there are still times where we say, that might be a good idea. That may be something that we could do, but we don't have the funds for that.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, we say that like you and I say that to you all the time, right?
Yeah.
I say that to you all the time. No, we talk about that, but it'll be down the road, right? And so those things, like, and as Jesus moves and works, like what he wants done will get accomplished. As his people are faithful to him, right? It's both of those things, right?
Yeah.
Jesus moves, his people are faithful, and the work gets accomplished. Jesus is going to keep moving. Whether we're faithful or not is really up to us, though. Yeah. And so I think that's a piece there. So yeah, it's a fun thought experiment.
This has been really interesting.
Yeah.
We've covered several spiritual disciplines.
Yep.
We have come to the end point of what I am aware of.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, would you like to share with everyone what the next one is going to be?
Yeah. So the other thing that is the other spiritual discipline, right? So we've talked about worship, we've talked about prayer, we've talked about fasting, we've talked about giving. We need to talk about in order to keep this all together, we need to talk about reading our Bible.
Okay.
And we need to talk about Bible study. We've made it a point of teaching at Harvest over the years. We're actually right now in the middle of our Sunday school series is how to read your Bible. And so, but in order to keep all of this, in one space, we need to have a conversation about why this matters. And so, that's what we'll do. Talk about how to read your Bible and why.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that conversation as well.
Yeah, that's super fun. That will be more fun than this one for me. So
That's fair.
Very good. Hey, thanks for this.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Thomas.